Yes, Tom, we can hear you. You probably didn't hear the bell if you rang one.
Yeah. Ready to start?
Sounds good.
Okay. So this chapter is Sitting in the Dark. Seems like I've been talking about the dark a lot lately. I still wonder why in Zen we like to wear black, but not to be distracted by colors or something, whatever. So, yeah, this when he's talking about the Ango period, it made me reflect back when I was very young. I mean, like 24. That was my first practice period at Tassajara. And, that it was longer than the Angos. It was 3 months instead of 1 month. And it was a lot more intense. I mean, we were out there in the middle of nowhere, down in the forest, close to Carmel Valley, California, and down at the bottom of a big, mountain down there. And yeah, it was like, 6 periods of Zazen every day for 3 months. Not every day. Every 4th day, every 4-day and 9-day on the calendar was a day off where you only had to sit twice. And you didn't have to go to work that day. And you could sleep in till like 6 o'clock or something like that. But during the regular schedule, the wake-up bell was 3:40, and the good night bell was like 9:15. So you were sitting in the Zendo till 9:15, and then the wake-up bell was at 3:40. And I remember Reb came to stay at my house, and I go, Reb, is the wake-up bell still at 3:40? And he goes, 3:50. So I said, you're slacking off, man. Anyway, so it was, yeah, I mean, and there's another guy I'm working with who just sat a 7-day at Daibusatsu, and he came out of it, and he was asking me, tell me about some of your early experiences when you were at Tassajara. And it was kind of like, well, it was such another world, but going back into it, I realized that there was a real grounding process that was important for me. And now I realize, geez, there was all this internal stuff I had no idea was there. All this anger, depression, family dynamics, and how it shaped my feeling like an oddball in the world. And there was all that stuff that needed to come up. And it was 50 years ago. And I'm reminded again and again how, the evolution of consciousness or spirit moves at its own pace. It doesn't move at the pace we want it to move at least not in my case, that's for sure. So 50 years later, it's better and clearer and much more peaceful, much more open. But, I really kind of got a deeper feeling. I got a deeper feeling for this chapter by reflecting back on all the stuff I'd been through over the years. And so sitting in the dark and the warmth coming as the sunlight arises. I just remember that feeling, even though we were all young. The head monk, Ed Brown, was only 29 that year. And Baker Roshi was maybe 37 or something, And there was one guy, I don't want to digress too much, but there was one guy who was really old. And one day at about halfway through the training period, he was gone, and he left a note saying, I wish you well, but I'm out of here. I mean, he was that old. He was 58 years old, believe it or not. So, but anyway, I mean, yeah, when he talks about the beautiful color of warmth, it reminded me of, there was a real intimacy, and compassion that arose within us, even though we were still very young. It really was a gathering together. I remember we'd end the 3-month training period with a 7-day session, which was really intense. And I think the Zen term is joriki, like gathering the mind, they call session. So Ango can be, for lay people, can be a way of having that same experience in a different way, less intense. So, it really helped me reflect on how compassion and intimacy really go together. I mean, it's like kind of an emotional unifying of our state, and then he talks about, what was it on page, where he talks about, thoughts start accumulating. If we go on doing that, we may eventually create a small life filled with anxiety and fear. In other words, meditation practice is basically a matter of looking inward, allowing all thoughts to become one. So he said that in the context of the Ango, as the warm light shines, we come out of our darkness and we discover our togetherness, and becoming all thoughts becoming one. And so, this guy I was talking about who just did his 7-day at Daibosatsu, they still do it pretty intense. It's mostly Rinzai, I think, where they decrease the amount of sleep each night. So you're sleeping 1 hour less each night to build up the joriki, I guess, the gathering together, the energy, that when you're really fully concentrated, more fully concentrated. But I said to him, it's like, because he was talking about how, I'm getting into a point where the thoughts are almost gone. I'm like, man, like, think about it. I mean, when are thoughts any more or less thoughts? All thoughts are one. Haven't they always been one? All, like in the Heart Sutra, all dharmas are expression of interest. All experiences are expressions of emptiness, including thoughts. When has any thought ever been less empty or more empty than any other thought? You don't have to get rid of thoughts. You don't have to be striving for a thought-free state. You're already free of thoughts. They can't do anything to you. They can't hurt you. They can't interfere with your freedom of spirit, But anyway, I guess we need that experience, having the experience that all thoughts are just empty, because I guess we're so used to, we feel like we're hardwired to do this grasping and turning away, this self-contraction and fear from life, from the free flow of our life force. And it ties into what he was talking about, the right amount, where we want to have just the right amount. And I thought of that in terms of the preceding chapter, the ripples, the 10,000 ripples, that a small wave gives off just as many ripples as a big wave, And, I used to be a football fan. I still am, sort of, but it's like all these guys huge people, huge guys trying to make this big splash, this big powerful force kind of thing. But no wave is any wetter than even the smallest ripple. So you don't get any more source, you don't get any more consciousness, you don't get any more essence of life from trying to be a big wave or just being a small wave. The ripples are just as far reaching and just as powerful. In fact, more powerful, because we don't dilute it with our self-conscious effort of trying to get something or trying to defend our little idea of ourselves, which doesn't amount to anything. So, but we do generate a lot of bliss in session. The Jorika does give us that feeling of power. I remember there was the first time I felt the Kundalini going up the back of my neck. I think I was like 28 years old or something like that. But Reb Anderson talks in his book on the Paramitas, he talks about, when you experience the bliss, it's an opportunity to give it away. And when we give it away, we may also have the experience of giving away our sense of being a separate self at the same time. And then he goes on to say, how each one of the paramitas is a perfection. There's 6 perfections. And the perfection aspect of each paramita is the wisdom. And so the wisdom of giving away the bliss which of course is part of the generosity paramita. The wisdom of giving away the bliss, and giving away the sense of being an independent self along with it. That's what perfects our concentration, which, concentration paramita is most deeply practiced in sesshin or in ango or in a training period like that. But that's the giving, that's the perfection, that's the wisdom aspect. And that prepares us for the perfection of wisdom itself in our daily life, is perfecting concentration in our meditation. So that giving away, it's the real, and, it's fueled by generosity. So it says which is the first paramita. And the way he describes the perfection of generosity is wisdom that realizes the interdependence, insubstantiality, and inseparability of the receiver, the giver, and giving itself, or the gift itself, giving itself. So all those things come together is the wisdom of compassion. But it's more about the aliveness, like in the Kanzeon, in the dark, in the light recall this, in the dark recall this. Moment after moment, the true heart arises, time after time. There's nothing but this. There's just the compassionate flow of our true nature, always there. And it's only our attachment to the thinking mind, that separates the awareness of being present into moments. It's, we can, when it's really flowing, you don't have to think in terms of moments. It's just ever-presence taking different forms. So it's the awareness of ever-presence, There's nothing but that, nothing but this. And I don't know, how long have I been talking? Can we have discussion? Is there anything? Oh, I wanted to read this Rilke poem that I thought was interesting. Really fits here. He was more of kind of an isolated guy, I think, in some ways, but he really gets to the essence here. He says, it's called This Darkness, Let This Darkness Be a Bell Tower, by Rainer Maria Rilke. You all know who Rilke is, right? He was a real famous poet in Austria, I believe, in the early 20th century. Quiet friend who has come so far, feel how your breathing makes more space around you. Let this darkness be a bell tower, and you the bell. As you ring, what batters you becomes your strength. Move back and forth into the change. What is it like, such intensity of pain? If the drink is bitter, turn yourself to wine. In this uncontainable night, be the mystery at the crossroads of your senses, the meaning discovered there. And if the world has ceased to hear you, say to the silent earth, I flow. To the rushing water, speak, I am.
Thank you, Roger. All right, so this is going to sound kind of strange, but the thing I got from your talk was when you said, how long have I been talking?
Yeah, I don't know. It felt like 2 minutes, so I thought, but I better check to see or something, 'cause I don't want to go, all of a sudden it's 9 o'clock or something.
No, it wasn't, because I had no sense of time. You had just completed an expression where you were saying that the moments, the moments are called out, right?
Right.
The moment of how long have I been talking, is an awareness of this time thing that we continually, it's a constraint, right? I mean, in many ways, obviously we live according to time and schedules. But at the same time, I started thinking about this. keep using time, right? At the same time, at the same moment, in the same breath, in the same expression. Start thinking about vacations and retirement, and kind of where the times I really enjoy myself are when things just flow, right? Or
Yeah.
just get lost, completely. It's that moment, by the ocean or walking on a trail where you're just conscious of everything and the flowers and everything around you. You're living, and where time is irrelevant, right? I mean, in many ways, and I think in a lot of ways for me, I think it's a constriction. Did I get 7 hours of sleep last night? Right? It becomes like a preoccupation. Did I get everything that I was supposed to? Am I living, in the right schedule? And my wife has an oral surgery coming up later this morning, and it's like everything is focused on this, being there, and being on time with that. And I think we get so focused on the time we forget the living part, right? I mean, the darkness, right? I mean, I saw a quote this week, and I'm not going to be able to capture it, but it was, when you take something out of fullness, it's still full. Right?
There you go. No vacancy.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's Lou Nordstrom's No Vacancy. You take something out of fullness, it's still full. There's no.
It's still full.
Yeah.
With that, when you get so preoccupied with time and timeliness and of things the way they're supposed to be, or sequence in terms of thinking and the eventuality, or what's going to occur, or like what's the linear. We become so linear, I think, in terms of I think we lose the experience with that, and I think it's probably a very nice thing. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I don't fear death, because I think it's going to be very peaceful darkness. It's going to be there really isn't much to say about it, even though people have written volumes on it with that. The same way with what was your face before your birth, right? All those things. But thank you for your talk. Very stimulating.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Oh, before someone else, I was just going to say, in the peaceful darkness, the question could come up, what is it that knows this darkness? Or will the darkness be known? Or will there suddenly be a new Tom with a different name, with no darkness in between? Maybe there won't be any gap. There was one other thing I wanted to say, but briefly, because he talks at the end of the chapter about everybody has a question, in the Shuso ceremony. Let's see here. Yeah, at the end, when they, let's see, no, it's like everybody, it's maybe called Dharma combat, but the Mondo invariably turns out to be a win-win situation since it is a Dharma context. But everybody has a question, and he says, one literally becomes the question one asks. And, another way of looking at that is realizing that the question itself arises out of the answer, out of this presence we are. So there's different ways of describing it, but everyone's question has that similarity, that oneness.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Tom. As I read the chapter and listened to you, one of the thing that stuck with me this week, I read the chapter last week after our last lesson, and it's this need for this peaceful retreat that our practice talks about. So the angle where you retreat. And I was thinking for us lay people, or at least for me, that yes, that would be that we all, I think, need that, to just retreat, take a break, and go inward. But for us who, I don't know, like, I don't know that, for example, we have a somewhat of a Sangha here, and how do we do something like that practically, that retreat? But it seems like it's necessary in our practice to do that kind of retreat, take a break. And as I listened to you, I was thinking about, the monastery and the monks. I mean, that in itself is a retreat from what we know as everyday life. The mortgage, the work hour, the stress of life, and so on. And so I was thinking about this practice, just even sitting here on the cushion. Like, I remember I came into Zen when I had kind of walked off my job and had a little space in my life. And like now I seem like I just even, I don't know if I'm practicing, because it's always like one stress after another, and I feel like I'm in a different space in terms of my practice and just how I feel inward. And I guess the retreat for me are the moments when I'm on the cushion, but I think about like a long-term retreat. And I don't know if the word is deepening my practice, but just listening to Roger and Tom talk, and then the whole idea of Zen, of like who is on the cushion and who, it's like, for me, like right now, that feels lost for me. And it's more the practical thing, like how do I deal with this or that or this issue? That's what's coming up for me this morning with this chapter.
Yeah, I gotta have a brief response to that. When I mentioned the hardwiring, it does seem like, I feel that way too at times, where it's like the hardwiring to be Roger, to be this separate body mind, is kind of overwhelms the peace that I'm in the midst of all the time, because I'm way out in the boonies here and I'm listening to the cicadas and I'm petting my dog and I really don't have anything to worry about except stuff I make up, there's nothing else to worry. But it's, I remember Reb saying, like in terms of sleeping, I was, the time back then I said, geez, Reb, I only sleep like 5 hours a night and all that. And he goes, well, that's okay. If your body won't let you sleep, that's okay, kind of thing. So he kind of helped me see that this hardwiring we have to be a person, a limited, self-contained, separate body mind. There's a deeper hardwiring there that he embodies very fully, in his teaching. And I think we all of us who study him sense that he embodies this deeper hardwiring that is like deeper than the pleasure and pain, because he's like unconditional acceptance. Whatever happens, thank you very much. I have no complaints. There's a deeper hardwiring, but deeper than pleasure or pain is wanting to know what's true. Wanting to know the truth of our being is deeper than that. And the way at least my conception of how he teaches this, is that we see that the hardwiring, the personal hardwiring that causes all our suffering, is really just a perverted expression of that deeper hardwiring. So we don't have to get rid of it. We can just see more clearly what it really is, because it doesn't really amount to anything other than our thoughts, kind of thing. Like Nisargadatta says, to be unattached to thoughts in the waking state is the deepest devotion to the Dharma. I don't know if that wasn't exactly brief, but yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Roger. It's always great to have this West Coast experience you have. The West Coast history of Zen with you. Fantastic. This really great. Just two things. Just to respond, first of all, to Claudette, what she's her concern is, it took me a long time, but eventually I started. I think Claudette, I think you carry your Zen with you, Claudette. You know, I think of many conversations we had about political things or small things. You carry your Zen with you inside of it. It's not something that we do in silence or we do on the path. It's something we sort of do in the confusion of everyday life with our son in Texas or with our job or with our mortgage. And that's sort of what it is, you know, in the end, you know, so it's separated from. And but I do. Your suggestion that we somehow have sort of more intense period of retreat, maybe in our sangha, such as it is a really great idea. I really that idea attracts me. So some more intense period of training that we could do at some point during the year. We'll talk about how we do that. But just the thing I want to talk about was when I read this chapter, I went and got my monastery bowls, my sangha bowls. You know, these are the bowls I took when I was going to sanghas. I bought Daibo Zatsu and Mount Shepard. I put these balls, little chopstick in. I had my sleeping bag, and I was really enthusiastic. I would sleep right there on the cushion, wake up, have my little bowls, wash my bowls, you know. All this, I was like serious Zen guy. And as great as that is, you know, most of the time I was thinking about how much my legs hurt and when it was going to be over. In reality, you know, how do I say I get out of here? You know, I'm out of here. Or I could say, or my goal was to say I've been to Sangha, not to be in Sangha. You know, I've been out of Sangha, not in the Sangha. You know what I mean? So that was just the thing that I learned. And it's sitting in the dark, all those battles with yourself that goes on. But I'm not. I've come to the conclusion that I'm not a sudden enlightenment guy in the end. We talk the dragon and the elephant and this thing. You know, I'm like an elephant. Over the years, the Scotch has been sitting in the barrels in the Scottish Highlands, and the 30-year-old Scotch has gotten better by sort of sitting in the barrel for a long time, you know. And they say when Scotch is there, it's about 10% evaporates. It's called a portion for the angels, you know. And I think that's what we've done. As we've matured the casks, a portion of the angels has come up, and a portion of the earth has come up. And I would bet all of us here, all six of us here, have become more compassionate than we were before Zen. Have become a little bit more calm before Zen. We take a moment before we panic and go on the attack before Zen, you know. So I'm not totally cured of being human, which is sort of my goal, to be cured from being human. I'm a more easygoing human being than I was. The mortgage and the health things don't scare me as much as they did, you know. And sitting in the dark has a great effect upon you if you can sort of hang on and sort of stay there. So I'm getting these bowls out, which is wonderful when they touch me again. I haven't done it in a long time, but I'll put away. I chopsticks and bowls in a sleeping bag. I was young and enthusiastic. What went wrong?
Well, recently I have been attending a weekend, and not a weekend, but couple hours on Saturday and Sunday, a seminar, a webinar with an organization called the Perry Center, P-A-R-I. And it has to do with David Bohm and the Holoflux. And I've been thinking about process, that life is the ripples in the stream, that it is process. And where we got mixed up is separating subject from object, but that it's all verb, it's a dynamic of movement. And when you sit in retreat, you realize that. And I realize that what we think is mental illness is also a form of process. It's caused, I believe, by the inner self wanting to liberate itself from the constraints of this paradigm we've been forced to live under. And I think my whole life has been on-go. I think my life has been a retreat. And I mean, mine has worked out that way because I didn't go into a normal profession I always worked, I always held jobs, but I didn't have a goal to become something, like I think I admire Madeleine Albright, and but people like that are very different from myself. And my dad was like me, and my mother, we are exactly 180 degrees, my mother and I, separate on the zodiac. Our birthdays are exactly 180 degrees apart, and she was a Virgo and I'm a Pisces, and I'm mutable water all the way. And I think more of us should, I know they screwed us up by giving us, you gotta make a living. I mean, that whole thing just rips people apart. They get ulcers and heart conditions and everything else from making a living. And while that's necessary, if you stand back and look at like TV, all they do is show commercials on buying crap or how sick you are, pharmacy. And that just indicates how toxic this society is. It really is toxic. And we should try as best we can to liberate ourselves from it. Those are my thoughts today. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Thanks for your deep insight.
And thank you, Roger Ongo. And I can't do Orioke. I drop my chopsticks. I remember being at a session at Green Gulch, and my hands don't coordinate, trying to do everything in unison. So Orioke to me became a source of anxiety. But I like just the right amount. Right. In Yiddish, there's a word, chazer. I'm sure Doc has heard the word chazer. Means don't be a pig.
Don't be a pig.
Orioke at Green Gulch with Donna. I'm sorry I missed that one.
Thank you all very much. That's like a thing that stands out for me in this chapter is the Orioke and the whole memory. It's like this little reminder of the practice, the experience of being in these spaces, which I think is so different to being online. And I really do miss that. And I would second or third what Kogetsu said. I think this format of the little postage stamps and our thoughts and whatnot, it's a setup for a delusion in a lot of ways that we should remember. And so if there's any way for us to be in a space at some point, I think we're a strong enough group that would be beneficial. But bringing me back to, these memories of just the incredible beauty of Orioke, just the right amount, and just the way it transformed over. I was in a 7-day sesshin when I first learned it, and it was the Rohatsu when Suzuki Roshi had died, and Reb was leading that a couple of years ago, and I remember just being nervous about it, and then taking this seat in which I thought my hip is going to literally pop out of the socket and land on the zabuton, and everyone is going to see that because it was excruciatingly painful. and because I had all the food and I couldn't move, and then just the relief of that. But the urgency, I think there's an urgency that happens in a zendo, in a real monastery that I experience. And it's just every day. They go to work every day, but there's an urgency of it. Just like we go to work every day in grind culture. Most of us, at least, although I try to make a choice about grind culture, I don't have a choice about grind culture. That's the culture. It's like you go to the airport, you don't have a choice. That's the airport, and I see that now with my son very much, just how he's being sucked into grind culture and the lack of agency, right? So we're all, I think, very privileged here that we're at an age or a perception level that we're able to say, oh, I can take retreat. Retreat is good from grind culture because grind culture has damaged all of us. But at the end, I think this right amount and remembering, for me, this is the thing I've been practicing with since Kato and getting triggered by Kato. But this idea that there's no comparison. There's no comparison. The toxic and the nutrition are one and the same. Everybody gets everybody gets the right amount. Everybody has 24 hours in a day, whether they're in grind culture or whatever culture. And awakenings are happening for Madeline Albright as well as for Donna Estes. This is just intrinsic. So our stepping aside to contemplate this is a choice, and maybe not a choice, maybe karma, who knows. But it's the setup, it's the setup that we're in. And everybody gets the right amount at the end of the whatever. And yeah, enough. Thank you.
Yeah, and the first steps we can take, not only the first steps, but the ongoing steps we take is to remember again and again, remembering our aspirations, for Buddhahood and for saving beings and realizing the intimacy we all share, whether it's in grind culture or Ango retreat culture, that the pure heart always rejoices. And thanks for mentioning that book, Cured. I read it, and what I really got a lot out of it was I learned a lot about the immune system and also about the chronic inflammation. That's the grind culture. 5 years ago, I went through some inflammation in my body for about several months, and then a physical therapist helped me, who was spiritually centered, helped me get through it. But there was some sort of energy shift where I had to be aware. I needed to become aware of deeper levels of inflammation I wasn't aware of. In some of the really more conscious, epidemiologists in terms of COVID were saying it's all these inflamed respiratory systems is why so many people were dying. Their immune systems were overreacting to the virus from this chronic inflammation they had in all these different, the deep levels of stress, the reactivity, the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic nervous system. So that was a very helpful book. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add something real quick that ties into this, was that the whole world of public health has shifted, because now people understand what public health people were trying to say in very complex terms about inequities, disparities, health outcomes, what our jobs do to our physical bodies. Who knew? You just needed some numbers up on, the TV screen, and people understand, oh, it's the people that don't have a choice, that have to go work every day, that are getting the virus and dying, or living in a house with 6 people and so on and so forth. So for me, like this book, Cure, which is really like an exception of the few people who are able to, manifest this cure. Again, this reminder of cure does not occur for everybody, right? It just doesn't. But healing, and this is the incredible thing, healing is always happening. Healing is always possible. Even if you're incredibly sick, it's amazing to look at how the body is automatically healing itself. We're not doing anything. So cure might be, esoteric and achievable only by those who sit for long periods or, whatever it is, redo their identity. But yeah, so that this right amount for everybody, this healing happening all on its own, is comforting for me.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. Healing versus just treating the symptoms. Yeah.
Or getting it completely gone. Again, the
Yeah.
tato thing, right? I'm sorry
Yeah.
to beat this to death, guys. But, like cancer or, some of these chronic illnesses, they invade the system and they live with the system. And sometimes they disappear and the system is returned to before the invader, right? That's one type of thing. That's like, I don't know, nirvana or something, right? Exceptional occurrences. But everyday people who have injuries, illnesses, broken bones, whatever, even if the bone doesn't heal correctly, or it has all sorts of spurs and, abnormalities that occur, the body is still trying to heal. The body is still sending in all these resources and we do nothing. This is just the way we're made. And I like to think of this in terms of the earth as well, too. We might not be able to cure what's happening right now. And in fact, it's, I don't know, I give it a 50-50 chance at best. But in the meanwhile, there's all of these amazing things that are happening. The urgency of the waking up of the epigenome and the bodhisattvas and whatnot. And that is what gives me hope. The healing more so than the nirvana of cure.
Yeah, and that's what was really amazing about that book is that, Dr. Rediger, he understands that, that it's the diet and the stress reduction and the, the retreat-like atmosphere is a help, but what really heals is love and connection, which all the contemplative traditions are saying. That's the bottom line. The pure heart, always joyful.
You talk about nirvana. I sent Tom an email this week. I said, is Scranton the pure lotus land?
Yeah.
And it is, and it's right here, right now. We don't need to be with Reb Anderson or at the Pari Center in Italy or at the Daibuzatsi Zendo Mount Tremper, where Green Gulch, right here. But the idea of us getting together some point physically does attract me, by the way.
Yeah.
Everybody's in Florida, so we have to have it down there rather than in the mountains of West Virginia. But I'd be interested in that. So let's think about that.
I think we should actually spend some time on that.
I agree.
Rohatsu, like really try to organize something.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sounds good.
Do you think?
Yeah,
good.
People are willing to, come to Maine or something like that. If you're willing to do a distance thing, but Florida's fine too. Especially in the weather.
I'd like to go to Maine. I've never really been there. I've driven through it, but it's supposed to be gorgeous.
It is, very much so. Roger, do you have a meta that you would like to share with us? Or I feel like some of what we just did was meta.
Oh, that was my meta was the Kanzeon. So I don't have an ending one. I just had the preliminary one.
Would anybody like to share a meta or some thoughts or?
I have the metta here that we normally do.
Okay, thank you.
May all beings be happy. May they be joyous and live in safety. All living beings, whether weak or strong, in high or middle or low realms of existence, small or great, visible or invisible, near or far, born or to be born, may all beings be happy. Let none deceive another, nor despise any being in any state. Let none by anger or hatred wish harm to another. Even as a mother, at the risk of her life, watches over and protects her only child, so with a boundless mind should one cherish all living things, suffusing love over the entire world, above, below, and all around without limit. So let each cultivate an infinite goodwill towards the whole world.